Hello and welcome to another edition of the Ducks Confidential Podcast. I am James Crepea and he is Aaron Fentress, and we are back.
What's up, James?
After a bit of a hiatus. Some of it not quite as deliberate, in part just because of logistics, quite honestly. I was on the road quite a bit. Aaron's been on the road quite a bit with the Blazers and things, so a little bit longer break between podcasts than we intended, but alas, here we are here on this Monday early in April.
Aaron hasn't gone anywhere with this team in a while because they're so bad, but that's another topic.
Oh, well, I blissfully ignorant for me when it comes to the Blazers. Because
wait, you're not reading my Blazers coverage of these 30-point blowouts?
Wow, I'm reading as much of your Blazers coverage of 30-point blowouts as you are reading on Oregon Diamond Sports in the spring. Which, given what our primary roles are and responsibilities are, I can understand why both of us find ourselves in that conundrum. But alas, here we are. Fair enough. As I say. We will put a bow on the basketball season that was. Yes, it's been obviously a couple of weeks since the season has ended, but because the Final Fours are going on, Women's National Championship was last night, Men's National Championship will be tonight. We'll kind of put a bow on it in that way, and kind of look back a little bit briefly on the Oregon men's women's basketball seasons and the start of the off seasons that will be and has been already in some cases. And then we'll obviously transition to football, where spring practice is 5 practices in to the 15 here in the spring, and where things stand in that regard. So starting with on the women's side, because like I say, since the women's championship was last night, so now the entirety of the women's season is over, not just the Oregon women's season or Oregon State for that matter, or the Pac-12 for that matter. What to make of this women's basketball season for the Ducks, Aaron? We're in terms of the offseason, since the season wrapped up in the first round of the NCAA tournament against Belmont in Knoxville there in overtime, double overtime. 4 transfers already, and Niara Sabally going to the WNBA. We'll get to what they need to do to potentially get back, but as you mentioned there, I think that's the reaction that a lot of fans have by way of, oh, well, there's 4 transfers, what the heck, and there's so many from last year as well. I think there needs to be a bit of an adjustment for, and I'm not even talking inside the program here, I'm talking outside. I think we all, the entire outside world who observes college athletics, has to start to get real comfortable with the idea that the female college athlete wants to play just as much as the male college athlete.
Was that ever disputed?
Well, apparently, because the sky is falling every time a female college athlete goes in the transfer portal. Apparently it is.
Beyond the program itself, or I mean just globally in terms of
both.
Really?
Both. You know, it's like, oh, well, the sky is falling. What's wrong? The place stinks. Fire the coach if somebody goes in the portal. And goes,
oh, gotcha.
There's 900 players in the portal.
Isn't that crazy?
There's going to be over 1,000 probably. And there was 1,000 last year. So you just go, this is the new world. You can hate it all you want. You can shake your fist at the sky all you want. But this is the way it's going to be. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, it is.
So I don't think we have to get paternalistic about it, whether we're talking about in men's or women's basketball or football or baseball or softball or any other sport. I don't think you get paternalistic about it. I don't think you get my day. Don't be the old guy on your lawn. You're not 18 to 23. You don't have the eligibility clock acting against you. You're not operating in a world of NIL. You don't have all the various other pressures that these athletes have. And on top of it, for the athletes who are already on campus, you know, other than the freshmen just this past year, but everybody else, the other 85, 90% of college athletes, they had to deal with the pandemic for disrupting and either killing off the 2020 tournaments in basketball or entire postseasons for spring sports and messing up the 21-22 seasons. Yeah. I'm not going to pretend to be in their shoes. I'm not going to tell you, well, here's what I would have done. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I would have done. Doesn't matter what Aaron would have done. Doesn't matter what anybody would have done. Hey, it's their lives. It's their choices. So if you don't like it, well, you know, learn to embrace it is all I can tell you if you're a college sports fan, because that's just the way it's going to be. I don't think it becomes any more or less indicative of something of any program if 3 or 4 players on any basketball team transfer, because that's just what the national average is right now. Yeah. The average team is losing 3 players.
But that doesn't make it right or good for the sport.
But there's no changing it.
Well,
there's no going backwards.
Of course. Well, I mean, we'll see.
Freedom of it happened because of lawsuits. It ain't going back. Okay. It ain't going back. And by the way, it was that way in 20 some odd other sports before the one-time transfer rule. The one-time transfer rule kicked in for the 5 sports that didn't have it, that had, football and men's women's basketball, etc., hockey and one other. They brought that in, and it was because they had pro leagues affiliated with it. And it was under the guise of academics and things historically, but ultimately speaking, things were being treated unequally even within college sports before. And I don't think Oregon fans need a reminder on this because of the softball program a couple of years ago and players going in the portal when the portal first started. But they didn't need the portal to do it, by the way. The one-time transfer applied in softball and plenty of other sports before this past offseason.
A bunch of softball players went to Texas, right?
Yeah, that was, and other places, but yes. And that goes back, again, 3+ years ago. So now you're seeing it in a different sport because the rule changed.
Right.
And now it's, because 3 or 4 players go from any one team, by the way. This isn't just an Oregon thing. That's why I say there's going to be over 1,000 players in the portal in women's college basketball.
But it's ridiculous.
Well, you say it's ridiculous. I say it's freedom of movement. And I personally am totally comfortable living in a world where people are allowed to make decisions that they feel are in their best interest that may prove not to be. Because that's part of being an adult. You think you're doing what is in your best interest. I think it's best for me to go change places. I want to play more. Turns out there isn't a market for your skills and services anymore. Well, whose fault is that other than you? You made a choice.
But but what percentage of people are transferring strictly for more playing time? Aren't there starters transferring?
Sure.
Okay, so that's not playing time then. That's not playing time then. That's something else.
But of the players who left Oregon, only one of them is a full-time starter. Of the four who left.
Yeah, if you're not a starter and there's no chance you probably was not likelihood you're going to be a starter, then it totally absolutely makes sense that you're going to move. My only thing is when you see starters bailing, why are they bailing? And if you're young and you're in line to start down the road, but you get impatient. Well, I mean, young within the construct of the 4 years, you know what I'm talking about. Then that can be kind of weird as well. But so I don't disagree with you. I just think that ultimately I don't think it's at all good for the sport, but like you said, it's irrelevant because it's here. So let's make the most of it. Right.
Yeah, and here's the thing. We were already in this place on the men's side. We were already here.
Yeah, I know.
Before the transfer rule, we were already here. There were already guys who transferred and were already playing for 3 and 4 schools in their careers. Yeah. So again, I'm not going to clutch pearls. I'm not going to get holier than thou.
I don't care at all about them being women.
Done it.
Yeah, I don't care about that.
To me, it's just, hey, ultimately, there's freedom of movement. If you don't like freedom of movement, well, I don't know what to tell you. You can go like professional sports where, they're locked in for a contract until an off season. And then as soon as, the confetti is still falling at the NBA finals and they're already talking about free agency. So you can like that. You can go to the professional model. You can do that.
Confetti is still falling.
You don't even get to appreciate a champion in professional sports. The next day, It's only about free agency and the draft.
Yep.
So you can go do that. That's an avenue for you. So if you happen to, I can't stand it. It's why I totally tune out certain professional sports because the whole sport, we're not about champions, we're not about success and winning. We're about the next contract for somebody else who I'm never going to meet and I'm never going to get their money. So I could care less. Right. But that's me. So again, for fans, I understand that there is the angst and the anxiety of, the team's losing this many players. Well, for one, Oregon's bringing in like 4 of the top 25 players, which they did. Again, you can say, well, they did that 2 years ago and now they just lost 4 of the 5. Right. Well, that's part of it. Yeah. It ultimately boils down to talent identification and procurement, but also personality identification. And look, execution on the athlete's part. That's not pointing fingers. That's anywhere. This is totally a global perspective. This is anywhere. The only time I would say where it's really indicative of something larger than, and given that the average program right now is averaging 3 transfers this offseason, each of the past couple of years, is something where you saw at Syracuse last year when they had like 9 transfers. Or in LSU men's basketball this season, and we know why, it's because of the sanctions, but they had literally every scholarship player go in the portal. Why? Well, because they know they're not going to be able to play in the postseason, and the program's going to get hammered from the NCAA.
And I'll say, hey, that is awesome. Because don't you remember, like, the teams in the past who got hit with sanctions and the players were stuck? That was always BS. Yeah.
Right. So that's my point, is that those things happen, and you go, oh, okay, well, freedom of movement's a bad thing? Well, I don't know. For the guys who get to move on from a place, did what LSU did, they seem to be in a better spot. So
because why penalize the players for things they'd had nothing to do with? Like USC football.
Right.
when the whole thing went down with Bush and those guys.
Sure. Yeah. So ultimately, look, it's a different mode. It's a different system. It's a different world. But at the same time, my message simply is embrace it or get over it. Because otherwise you're just going to be yelling and screaming about every team in America.
But the problem is and I wonder how this is going to erode any type of fandom, because when you're a fan, you want to embrace the kids who are coming to Oregon and follow them and root for them. And one other thing about fan bases too is every fan base thinks their school or their program is the best. And why would anyone not want to come to their program, let alone come and then leave? It's such a slap in the face that you wonder if over time fans start feeling like, well, I can't get excited about these guys coming or these women coming because they could be gone in a year or two, no matter how well they do. So why do I care? If they don't care, why do I care? That's a danger.
There is that perspective. And that's going to be the battle for college athletics administrators to figure out. But like I say, that's just, you know what? They sold out the arena last night for the women's championship in Minneapolis. Over 18,000 people were there. They're going to sell out a football stadium tonight in New Orleans. I think at the top level, winning ultimately does just kind of cure a lot of ills in that regard. If you believe these are ills in the first, believe these are ills in the first place.
Right. But not everyone can win. So I just wonder, like, over time, it'll be interesting to see 10 years from now.
Well, would you rather win with a bunch of win with a bunch of transfers and 5 stars and what have you, or one and dones, or be really bad but everyone's really loyal? And I'm saying a hypothetical.
No, I know what you're saying. No, I agree with you. Yeah, if you're winning, yeah, you're right. If you're winning, it's not going to matter who's in the jerseys, right? But not everyone can win. So if you're a fan and you love your team and they're not necessarily great, but you love so-and-so, but so-and-so's bailing, and then someone else comes in and they're bailing. As soon as you get to know them, they're bailing. Then you're just not going to feel as connected to the program, I think, over time. We shall see, but I do think it doesn't. Well, I agree. I believe wholeheartedly it's not good for college sports at all, but we'll see how it works out.
In terms of what the program will need in order to get back to the NCAA tournament. For one, the players they're bringing in are pretty nice. Starting with Chance Gray and others, but yeah, four top 25 caliber players is certainly a good place to start. Having said that, they're all going to be freshmen. They're all going to be unproven. They're all, lack college experience, haven't played at this level, etc.
And 2 will be gone by next year. So,
well, and Aaron will tell you who's going to transfer a year from now, and 2 years from now, and 3 years from now. But no, ultimately, to me, what they've lacked, what Oregon women's basketball has lacked the past 2 seasons, is they don't have an alpha personality. And that's what I had asked Kelly Graves after the game, and then what he had said it, and then it became headlines because he's calling out players, and it wasn't exactly that way. It was not an unprompted thing. The question was, as phrased, how do you go out and find that alpha? Because they haven't had it. And it's not a matter of comparing everybody to Sabrina. That's a fool's errand. That's a total waste of time. To go down that road, you're a moron, frankly. If you just want to say everybody has to be Sabrina Ionescu, good luck. Yeah,
wait, all 4 of these freshmen aren't Sabrinas?
I mean,
No?
stop.
Okay.
Those kinds of players, like that's absolutely laudably absurd. It's not a matter of that. It's a matter of trying to see, can you find the player and the personality? Look at the teams who made the women's Final Four. Every single one of them was led by no less than one alpha personality. No less than one. Those players, beyond their unbelievable talents, those players are that way because they are simply wired different. Yeah, their talents ultimately that's what makes them truly otherworldly, not just All-Americans, first-team All-Americans, and some of the best players in the country. You can be incredibly talented, but if you lack that certain fire, and that I'm not talking about fire in the determination way, it's the obsessive. It's in any other context, it would be almost viewed as unhealthy, but in competitive sport, it's viewed as, such a selling point. Finding that kind of player is extremely difficult. Not every team has it. And the teams that do, usually end up making it pretty far in the NCAA tournament and win national championships. You need to find that person or people. They haven't had that personality in the room the past 2 years. Forget about skills. Forget about three-point shooting. Forget about defense. Forget about rebounding. We can get into any which thing. Ultimately, without the person in charge, in terms of in the room in charge, This isn't just a coach's thing. Kelly Graves and Dana Altman can't go out there and shoot threes. They can't go out there and defend. They can call all the plays you want. They can yell and scream at practice all you want. For some people, yelling and screaming in the game is apparently the only way a coach can show engagement in the eyes of some fans, which is fine.
I know. Why doesn't the coach do anything? He's just sitting there.
Right. Okay. If that's all you think, but ultimately they can't go out there and jack a three. Sooner or later, the players got to be able to hit the shots too. Ultimately, who's the person in the room who's going to hold their own teammates accountable, hold themselves accountable? And there were numerous instances the past 2 seasons for Oregon women's basketball where that came up, where nobody was. And it had to only come from the coaches. And when that's that way all the time, that's hard. And that's not blaming anybody, by the way. That's just saying, hey, that's either in you or it isn't. And if it isn't, which is fine, it's acceptable, but you have to try and identify and find that and procure that from somewhere else. That's in an intangible sense. In the more tangible sense, they need more sharpshooters. And I don't know enough about the skill sets of the 4 young women who they're bringing in as freshmen, but ultimately they need sharpshooters. And I mean real sharpshooters. They need 40+% 3-point shooters. Multiple. And I know, yeah, easier said than done. Well, point is there are a couple of players in the transfer portal from other parts of the country, from Central Florida, from Minnesota, from other programs, who are 40+% 3-point shooters, who average in double figures, who are really good. Those are the kinds of players Oregon needs to be, and I'm sure everybody is, pursuing in the transfer portal because, yeah, those are the kinds of players this program needs by skill, let alone the intangible part that you have to try and find another way. You're listening to Ducks Confidential. We'll be back after a quick break. On the men's side, shifting gears to, since again, similar conversation, but one player in the portal, 2 players in the portal so far, with Eric Williams, technically speaking, keeping his eligibility alive, and we'll see if he ends up going a professional route or ends up going elsewhere to extend his college career for one more year, and Isaac Johnson also going in the portal as well. They end up making it to the NIT. They win a game at Utah State, lose a game at Texas A&M, which is hardly not anything to feel bad about. Rough that it ends the way it does, and that it's the NIT, and really more so that Will Richardson doesn't get to finish off the season due to mono. What to make of this season for the Oregon men, where expectations were certainly higher, internally and externally?
I've never seen Altman that pissed at the end of the season. He seemed very, very frustrated with the lack of work ethic, which is not something he's used to dealing with. By
the end, I think it probably moved on from anger to just pure frustration, and just like a shrugging of the shoulders at that point of like, man, here we are, and one where we were supposed to be. And I'll be damned if we're going to be back here again, but we've gone through this for 4 or 5 months now. And at this point, there was no change in it, kind of thing. We're just going to make the best of the situation we're in. But now that it's wrapped up, here's how it all, to degrees of went down. And to your point, I think that part of it definitely frustrated Dana, definitely frustrated members of the coaching staff that they didn't have. Again, we're talking about like that alpha. No, I think Will Richardson had aspects of that. I do believe that he has aspects of that. I think Devian Harmon has probably more aspects in the personality way, and his skill set at times when he flourished and played at his best, he showed it all around. The problem was that the consistency wasn't there. He'd have 2 or 3 games at a really, really high level, and then there'd be 5 or 6 straight games where you go, where is it? So getting the consistency more from him. Richardson was more consistent. And then, like I say, then his season ends because of mono, and that's really unfortunate. Having said that, that doesn't explain everything back in, some of the early losses in December, or you name it, right? And the really early portion of the season, November, whatnot. So, again, in terms of now going forward, one, we still have to see exactly what Richardson does. I think most people would be surprised at this point if he chose to return. Having said that, we are where we are, and he hasn't publicly announced anything yet. He can go through the draft waters process and maintain his eligibility, or after 4 seasons of college basketball, he doesn't owe anybody the additional year. He has the additional year. Doesn't owe it to Oregon or anybody else to come back. If he chooses to move on, He could have done it a year ago. But if he chooses to come back, well, that's a pretty big piece to have coming back if he can get it. If not, they're adding a absolutely stellar group of players, and we'll see exactly with Mookie if there's a reclassification possibility there or not. I can't speak into it. I've seen one report, but I can't.
He's going to do an Anthony Simons.
But ultimately, if they bring in the caliber of players that they're bringing in, whether Will Richardson returns or not, they're going to be on paper. They look like they're going to be a really good team again. Now it's going to be young and other thing. Yeah, it is. We'll see how it comes together. You know that Dana every offseason and the staff every offseason they do this. They managed to bring in more transfers than anybody. And this was the first time in a minute that it totally didn't work. Right. Where it did end up in the NIT, and it ended up in the NIT in this fashion, in this way. And again, there were a multitude of reasons for it. But ultimately, how do they get back? Well, part of it is, again, bringing in different talent and procuring that talent. Well, they've already gotten quite a lineup set to be coming in. And then it becomes about off-season, not just development or spend more time in the gym and the weight room. These guys got to be around each other more. And Dana talked a lot about that towards the end of the season, about all various things last summer of who was in, who was out, who was available, who wasn't, all those things. Plays into it. That said, there's who was available to practice together on the second or third week in July or August, win you or lose you a game in March. That's a long way for correlation. There's a long way, forget about causation. That's a long way for correlation. But having said that, this is still college basketball. They are still all young. Outside of a couple of really experienced players like Richardson or Jacob Young this past season, many of these guys, even if you realize, even Will Richardson, when we look back at it, you're going to say, well, that was the most experienced guy. Yeah, and how many games did he play? Like 100. 100. After 4 years of college basketball. I realized one season was really messed up and he had a hand injury for another. But 100.
That's not a lot.
A rookie in the NBA is going to go through an 82-game season plus the preseason. If they make the playoffs on their team, they're going to play 100 games. That's 1 year. Peyton Pritchard probably played more games for the Boston Celtics last year than a 4-year college player plays in their careers. It's just the way it goes. So that's why I said when we talk about like young in college basketball, I always say, and I'm not doing it to be snarky with you. I'm going to say like, well, they're all young because they're in college. They're all young because they're in college, not just because of age. What is experience? How do we define experience? When someone's really experienced and they played 50 games, like that's not that much.
Well, but a college career would probably be 130, right? So if someone's played 80 versus
a college career at its max.
I know, but if someone's played 80 versus someone who's played 20, that's 4 times as much experience. It's all relative.
Absolutely. That's what it is. That's my point. It is all relative. Is that the max, even if you made it to the national championship game every single year, your career will still be about 150 games. That's at the extreme. That's blow it out. That's probably goes to 140 games. So that's really, really extreme. That's why you still have to say, like, how much does experience really matter? It matters. Don't get me wrong. But because, like, every game is basically 1% of a full career if you're going over 4 years. If a guy's a one and done, you're talking like one game is 3% of their career. It's kind of, it just is what it is. So again, they've got certainly a lot of talent to come in, but areas to address. Assistant coach is still higher here, which I'm sure actually could end up happening this week now that the national championship and the coaches convention is wrapping up. Frankly, I'm sure Dana's been interviewing people the last couple of days. So we'll see how that goes. But now to get into football here for the next 10, 15 minutes, now that we are 5 spring practices in, albeit, 2 were really early and 3 since we got back from break. And we've got 10 more practices to go, 2 scrimmages, and of course the spring game on April 23rd. We've heard from coordinators this past week, heard from quarterbacks this past week, which is of course where everybody wants to focus their attention, as they should, when there's a quarterback competition, a quarterback addition in Bo Nix, and etc. So what we heard from the coordinators was from Kenny Dillingham, offense is going to be predicated on space and pace. I don't think that's a massive revelation for folks who know anything about the hurry up, no huddle offense, but that is where he's harping on. Defense from Tosh Lupoy, he's gotten it across very clearly. The talking point there is that they want to be relentless, and from the quarterbacks that they're really focused on consistency more so than well, a certain completion percentage or just explosive plays or any one of things, just the level of consistency. Again, all these things, these are the talking points. These are the things that we got from it.
Right.
The question here, Aaron, but we'll probably tackle here for the next 10 plus minutes is, can Oregon take what they have in terms of personnel and what they want to be philosophically and schematically? Can they meld those things together to have the success that they are aiming for here in Dan Lanning's first year this fall?
Well, if the recruiting classes that Mario put together are as great as everyone made them out to be for several years, then the talent should be there, right? That shouldn't necessarily be an issue. Obviously, you got to have a quarterback who can make plays at a high level if you want to have great success. And so we don't know if Bo is capable of being that guy or not. For all we know, he could blow up, or Ty Thompson beats him out, which to me is the best case scenario. Because if Ty Thompson can beat out Bo Nix, then that shows he's grown tremendously in every aspect of playing quarterback and displaying traits that he did not display last year, which is why he couldn't make a dent into Brown. So then you have a super talented kid who has shown you enough aptitude to beat out a Bo Nix. And now maybe you have someone who can be special. And then that's when you can take a big level. But you have a mediocre defense that you're trying to repair. The thing to me is all this talk about what they want to do, what they don't want to do, and the talent, this, talent, that. If it's a smart coaching staff, they're going to tailor what they want to do to fit the talent that they have. You're not going to make the talent that you have to do things you want to do if that talent can't do it, because then you're going to lose ball games. So I think they're smart enough to do that. Do I think there's enough talent on this roster to contend for a national championship? No way in hell do I believe that. Do I think they can win the conference? Possibly. But to me, it's going to all come down to if the quarterback is special enough to elevate this team in games where other things aren't going well. And that's what Brown was not capable of doing. He was good when the running game was there. When the running game wasn't there and you relied on him, it was a disaster. You got to have someone who can elevate you in those situations, or you're going to lose games along the way. And we all know if you lose two, you're pretty much done in terms of national championship aspirations. So we'll see. I mean, there's no reason to believe they cannot at all elevate to a high level, but they've got a lot of work to do.
There's no doubt they have a lot of work to do. That goes without saying. When you're changing quarterbacks, no matter what you're doing, you're changing. Either you're going with the guy who is already here, who is very inexperienced, or you're going to a transfer who knows the system, but is coming from a different place and is acclimating to personnel, new line, new system, what have you. Defensively, they have a lot of work to do. They have a ton of work to do defensively. Ton. They're losing 2 All-Americans.
Right.
They're losing one of the most disruptive pass rushers in the country on a team who, even with him, had its fewest sacks since the stat became tracked, and the nation's leader in interceptions. That's what they're losing.
Yep.
Yeah, kind of a big deal. Where is the pass rush coming from? Where are the takeaways coming from? Now, they're losing 4 guys in the secondary, including the nation's leader in interceptions, but they're losing, the 2 starting cornerbacks along with it. And one of their other rotational / starting safeties, depending on how exactly you want to classify Jordan Happel there by the end of the season. He was certainly a starter by the end. So they have a lot to replace on the defensive side and a lot of room for improvement.
And a lot to replace from a defense that finished 79th. It's not like they're replacing a bunch of guys from a top 10 or top 20 or 30 defense, from a defense that statistically was not good at all.
No. And to that point, the glass half full Oregon fan out there will say, well,
the other guys are better.
Justin Flo. Well, no, they'll say,
well, they didn't have Flo.
Was hurt and they didn't have Flo. And if you have Flo and you hope that Flo comes back and is fully healthy and is 100%, he's been limited so far in spring, which is somewhat understandable. But point is you get that guy back and you hope that changes. Certainly. Not going to be able to judge much by way of the spring with the defensive front, because 3 of your top defensive tackles right now are limited because of off-season surgeries. Okay, so that puts a little bit of a slightly different perspective on things. Having said all that, just on coaching and scheme alone, I think the defense will improve. Just on coaching and scheme alone. I don't think that Tim DeRuyter and that staff on the defensive side last season got the most out of the talent that they had. Whether the talent was hurt, whether the talent was limited, whether, KT was playing on a sprained ankle, whatever. I don't think they got the most out of what they had last season. I think the change defensively to Lanning and Lupoy and the rest of the defensive staff will help. in a big way. I think we're talking about offense and defense. We haven't even gotten to special teams because, I mean, come on, we're not going to go on and on about the kickers right now. But I think that's an area that's going to see dramatic improvement. You don't bring in Joe Lorig, who's had top 10 units at Penn State year after year after year, which is hard to do on special teams because personnel is constantly changing. You can have the great kicker, but your coverage units are also good. Yeah, he's had top 10 units year after year after year. You don't just get that guy and don't see dramatic improvement. And that's been an area that's been really bad. So those are areas that I think are just going to get better by coaching alone, just by scheme and coaching alone. I do. Offensively, I think there is some of the more questions.
But how much better? But how much better?
That's the thing. Well, that's right.
I mean, better, yeah.
Because
they're going to be 50th.
I've got questions about where does that pass rush come from? Right. You can say, well, Braden Swinson's there. Yes, he is. And I think he could be a hell of a player. But you need more than one. You need more than two.
And if you're bringing extra guys to bring that pressure, who are your cover guys?
Right.
Because you got to cover.
Right. So they've begun to, they think they've had some answers. They think they've brought in certain transfers, certainly Asante Mane or Christian Gonzalez and certain guys who certainly really experienced already in the Pac-12, established in that way. That helps. That's a big start in the right direction. Having said that, in and of itself, yeah, there's still questions to ask on the defense. To me, the bigger questions are on offense, though. They are. While statistically the offense had more success last season than the defense, I think the defense will, even with the players that they have to replace, which are really good players in some cases, I think there are probably more questions on the offense, mainly due to depth. I think the offensive line opens up a lot of things for you in the passing game and in the running game. The offensive line was successful last season. The whole group's basically back for all intents and purposes. George Moore moves on, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, the rest of the group is all back. That's huge. That will give, if Bo Nix wins the job, it will give him the best protection he's ever had in his career. I mean, by far, it's not even a remote debate to be had. If it's Ty Thompson, it'll give him a lot of protection for a young quarterback. Either way, whoever wins that job between those two, and yes, I'm not just looking past Jay Butterfield, but it's clear right now that those two seem to have a leg up at the moment. In that competition, the quarterback's going to have more protection and really good protection, particularly in the Pac-12. I'm not saying against Georgia in the season opener necessarily, not proclaiming anything about September 3rd and, in Georgia. But bottom line, they're going to have a lot of protection in Pac-12 play and open up a lot of run lanes in Pac-12 play. But you have a young running back core who is largely inexperienced. I'm not going to go into the hows and whys. They are just lacking game experience. You don't have Verdell and Dye anymore. We've gone over this. So, yes, Cardwell. And McGee is now moving into a receiver primarily position, and Dollars, and bringing in a Noah Whittingham, and yeah.
But you know how I feel about that.
Room with less.
You know how I feel about that, though.
But you can play a lot. Yeah, you can play a lot, and play immediately at running back and have an instant impact as a younger player because you just can't.
If the line
you just
is
can't.
there.
So I'm saying it's an unknown relative to what you had before, but because of that skill position, you can play and a receiver, you can play and make instant impact at the skill positions on offense. That's just the way it is. That's the way the sport goes. Yeah. It's unknown. You can't go out there and claim, well, you're going to have multiple 1,000-yard receivers just because these guys were, former 4- and 5-star players. Well, you'd like to think that as a fan, but you don't know it. You don't really know it. You may think it, but you're not 100% sure. So I think there's just some questions there. I think there's mainly questions at the receiver position. I still go back to it. We've talked about it already plenty of times this offseason. Probably going to continue to talk about it for the next 4 freaking months. They have 9 scholarship receivers. That's with moving McGee over to receiver and just calling him a receiver, by the way. And, a group of those 9, one, you've got a freshman in Justice Lowe who just got to campus. One, you've got Josh Delgado, who wasn't playing last season. And 3 is Isaiah Crocker, who came on big late, but for prior years, had not really played much at all. That's 3 out of your 9. Then you're bringing in a Chase Cota, who is an experienced player, an in-state guy, good guy to have in a room, senior leader, etc., from UCLA. But he hadn't been in this system. He hadn't been in this program before last week. So half of your room is guys who are either really lacking experience or just haven't been in the program for more than a week. That's not a criticism. I'm saying that's just reality. So, yeah, you're still banking on Franklin and Thornton to be those guys for you in the future. And I think they can be. Certainly, they were heralded recruits. They were top 10 receivers in their class. And Isaiah Brevard, for that matter, also, not that far off in that class. You're asking a lot of them. I'm not telling you it can't be done. What I'm telling you is that if you're going to go out and proclaim that they're going to both catch for 1,000 yards next season, I'm just saying, can we get like, can we see a spring scrimmage first?
Yeah. I mean, you got, plus you have to have the quarterback capable of, producing those types of numbers out of your receivers. I agree with everything you're saying. There's a lot of youth there and a lot of question marks there because we haven't seen people prove themselves on a consistent basis. I feel like the talent is there enough at receiver that they can put up big numbers if the quarterback is at a high level. If the quarterback's average, then the receivers are not going to be able to elevate the quarterback. I don't believe, because I think they're too young. But I do think there's enough raw talent there that you can scheme well with those guys. You can definitely, blow the top off the defense and open things up underneath. You just have to have a quarterback who can deliver those intermediate routes, those timing routes at a consistent basis beyond 10 yards, which is one thing people complained about Brown last year.
So they need to improve the deep passing. That goes without question. That on both ends. They need to improve on the passing side. They need to improve the catching side on deep passing. No argument. Zero.
Running back though, Cardwell's going to have it. I mean, if I'm a coach and I take over a program and you tell me, okay, you can either have a young secondary and you lost some key guys in the draft on defense, or you can have a really young offensive line. You lost some guys in the draft and you got holes there. I'm taking the holes in the secondary all day. Give me the seasoned offensive line, because the offensive line is going to make everyone on offense better. And then if your offense is better, guess what else is better? Your defense is better. If I can run the football and protect my quarterback, that helps my defense. So the fact that the offensive line is back, solidified, and they were good last year. I'm not going to say great because they still got their asses kicked against Utah twice. So that's a question mark, but they're still really good. All right. Then I'm feeling good about myself taking over a program, knowing at least I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to be able to run the football. I'm going to be able to protect my quarterback. Now I got to have a quarterback who can make plays. I'm going to score 30 plus points a game. They're going to. The question is, can they get higher than that? And can the defense back it up? Support it is what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, the line covers up a lot of things. They covered up a lot of things last year. It can cover up a lot of things this year as well. Last thing I'll say on the receivers is, and I believe I mentioned this before, but again, bear saying again, we haven't gotten updated heights and weights, mainly the weights. Obviously, you'll think this guy's going to change their height too much. We haven't got updated weights yet this offseason. We'll see if we get it any time in the spring. I hope so. I hope we're not treating that like state secrets. I really hope so. And I know fans love reading it. I see what the numbers are every year when I write what they are. The receivers, the skinnies moniker that the now second year trio goes by. I know it's a thing. I know it's a thing that the fans certainly have embraced, and that's great. That's awesome. That can't be looked at as an endearing term at receiver. Nobody looked at an NFL Hall of Fame wide receiver and said, he was a real scrappy, skinny guy. You don't want your top receivers to be wiry. You're going up against corners and safeties who want to knock your block off. You got to go out. Look, it is what it is. They were freshmen, fine. All right, we'll see what they look like as second-year players. But 6'2", 169 ain't exactly how you draw it up. I know it became a thing and it was something that was embraced and what have you. Oh, yeah, unleash the skinnies, the whole thing. I get it. How about if they're 185, 190?
You need some physicality for a lot of different reasons.
There's certain things you can do. You're just going to get knocked off the ball in the 170s.
Right, exactly.
They're going to be bigger corners who are 30 pounds heavier than you.
Yeah, and they're going to jam you up, disrupt your routes. And now the offensive line protection doesn't matter because the guy's not open anyway. So eventually the protection is going to fall apart. And 100%.
Right. So we'll see once we get further in the offseason and in fall camp and things. It's not just something to assess in April, more so in August. But just mention that because for as much as you want to get excited about the receivers, I still say these guys have lots to improve on.
Yeah, there's a lot
also, physically, they have to fill out their frames a little bit.
So before we go, though, what's your take on QB right now? Because a lot of people made a big deal out of Ty taking the first team reps that one day.
Right, and as they should. It's a small sample. It's a small sample, and it's the sample that we see, so therefore it's going to be the sample that makes headlines. And again, the second part that you don't see is, if you didn't read the full story and account, was that the drive ended in an interception. So he took first team reps, and then he completed a deep pass and it ended in an interception. Now it's all small sample. We saw one period where each quarterback got to lead their unit once. Right. We didn't see the rest of that practice. We didn't see if they changed the very next time they went out there. We didn't see the practice before that or the practice after that. Yep. So for all we know, Bo Nix could be taking 90% of the first team reps. That just happened to be the one we saw. But it is the one that we saw. So therefore, it makes headlines. And frankly, it made more headlines in the Southeast than it made here.
I know. And here's what's funny about it. When I saw all that stuff, I was cracking up laughing because that is exactly why Oregon started closing practices. And even when Mark Helfrich took over, and we were all hoping he would reopen practices. He told a story about at Arizona State where one kid took a bunch of first team reps and the other kid didn't. And it got reported that kid must be the starter. And then the dad of the other kid called, like it was just this big giant mess. And this is exactly why, and not the only reason, but it's one reason why is because all this misinformation gets out there because people see this one thing. And then I saw people breaking down the entire like offensive lineup, the defensive lineup, first team and second, like all this speculation over one simple little team period when you're not seeing the vast majority of what's going on. It was just hilarious to me.
Well, it's what you see, so you report on what's there.
I know.
You can acknowledge
that's how
that
people take
a small
it.
sample.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's how people take it. People
how much,
around
but you can't control people's perceptions. Right. But you can't control the perception. All I can do is put out or anybody else who is there, responsibly speaking, can do is put out the information from what you see with your own two eyes. After that, then it becomes, well, I can't change your perception.
100%.
If you want to take what happened on day 4 and say codify it and chisel it in stone, that's up to you. I don't. I take it as on day 4 in period 3 of practice, this is what we saw and this is what happened.
Right.
Period. End of sentence. I'll see what happens on day 5 and then day 6 when we're out there. I'll see what happens on day 8 and day 9 when we're out there. And we'll see what happens in the spring game when we're out there. And
right.
We'll go from there. But I'm not going to go and know anything. Well, in the 4th practice, let me mark this down. Correlation again. 4th free practice. Here's the starter. And then, come on.
So what's your hunch though on how things are going?
I think I think it's a competition between, again, yes, Butterfield has certainly taken reps and he might have the strongest arm of the 3, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. But I think that, it's going to come down to Nix and Thompson and we'll see how things play out. To me, I'm not proselytizing anything here on, 5 practices in where we've seen a limited time that we have.
Who had the tighter spiral in practice? Who did you check out the footwork, James?
Could I get the RPMs? Yeah.
Whose footwork was better on boots and waggles?
Oh, yeah. Well, we've got plenty of time.
What are you doing down there, James? Yeah, I'm kidding.
A little early to go. Like I say, I'm not going to play Nostradamus here in the early.
Who gets their fingers on the strings quicker, James?
Yeah. Well.
That's what I want to know.
For those who want the fly off the handle perspectives, I'm sure they can probably find them somewhere, but it ain't going to be from me. I just put out, hey, this is where it was on this day. We'll see where it is the next day.
That's because you're a seasoned pro, James. Well, I'm fascinated by it. I think it's going to be awesome to see how it works out. If Ty wins the job, that is huge news for the program, I think. If Bo wins it, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but it means that Ty did not necessarily rise to the challenge in one spring. There's a lot of football to go left for him, but I want to see him show that he is what he's supposed to, what he was allegedly supposed to be coming out. So we'll see.
And guess what? And if Nix wins the job and ends up being the starter next year, and in the grand scheme of things, I know he has 2 years of eligibility, but realistically speaking, I think anyone in that position is thinking in terms of 1 year. It is not the end of the world for the first time to be a full-time starter, to be a third-year player. About 10, 15 years ago, for all those who want the guys who spend 4 and 5 years in a program because they're program guys, at the quarterback position, that used to mean that you spent 2 or 3 years waiting your turn. So if that's the way it goes, I don't think that's the end of the world.
It's not the end of the world, but then you're counting on, if we're talking national playoffs, you're counting on Bo all of a sudden becoming something he hasn't been yet, which is possible. I'm just saying.
I don't go talking playoffs in September. I'm definitely not talking playoffs in April. Last year in week 2 in Columbus, when I was hearing about the playoffs, I go I am going to just bang my head against the wall.
You and I were both saying that. I'm just saying that's what people expect from this program. So, but if we want to temper it down to just winning the North, then that's a different conversation.
Well, no, I think the temper down is compete for and win conference championships. And if you do that, you're automatically in the consideration and conversation for playoff because you've therefore won a conference and a power conference at that. So that's where it should be. I think he has certainly proven the capability of leading successful teams in successful wins while at Auburn. Was there some inconsistency? Yeah, there was. Obviously, things weren't exactly peachy the whole time. If it was, they wouldn't have changed offensive coordinators and fired head coaches along as, tenure either. So but it wasn't always the offense. It wasn't always the quarterback. It wasn't even always the head coach. To be quite honest, there were a lot of things going on over there. Be that as it all may. We'll see. Again, I'm not going about proclaiming who's going to be the starter or about playoff contention on April 4th. That is for sure. That is the one
But
thing
on the next podcast, you're going to have the spin rate of the passes, and you're going to have the footwork analysis. I expect that from you, James.
Yes, I will break down. I will stopwatch it. Much like 40 times. I will stopwatch the 3 and 5 step drops for everybody and break it down as follows. So appreciate everybody as always for listening to this edition and every edition of the Ducks Confidential Podcast. Reminder for those who don't yet subscribe, make sure to give us a like, a follow, subscribe, wherever it is that you get your podcast. That way it just automatically pops up on your device accordingly. And we promise it probably won't be a month again before we have another edition. So with that said, I am James Crepea and he is Aaron Fentress, and we will see you next time.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Hi, I'm Anna Faris, and I have this podcast fittingly titled Anna Faris is Unqualified, where each week a different celebrity and I attempt to give relationship and dating advice. Recent co-hosts have included Matthew McConaughey.
You got somebody you care about, you lost track of them. Go find out.
Margaret Cho.
Vacation sex is always irresistible.
Gwyneth Paltrow.
I could make it all about them and not have to focus on my own problems.
And Seth Rogen. So if you're wondering what your favorite celebrity or I would do in your situation, just listen and subscribe to Anna Faris is Unqualified. Free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.